Hey, welcome to the Lean Into Artcast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers engage with different topics relating to or concerning with visual storytelling, making stuff, drawing stuff, designing stuff, and then all the thoughts that go into planning and living with a lifestyle of making and drawing and designing stuff. We think really hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hey, I'm Rob Stenzinger, a user experience and game designer. How goes Jersey?
Okay. We're just on the very edge of the holiday season and the year end. So it seems like we're going to be coming up against a lot of heavy-duty thinking with regards to reflecting on year past and projecting into year future. Yeah?
Oh, yeah. It's that time. Even when I think, I'm going to take a lighter weight approach, I find something that I've enjoyed the benefits and the experience of doing some kind of digging through, like past experience and my expectations versus outcomes and what have you. And there's so many things I've learned from that process. And I think I might be a little bit of a oddball in the way that I don't feel sad or burned by like New Year's resolutions, right? Even when they haven't worked out. Maybe I'm not trying hard enough, right? Maybe. But or I might be using the wrong word to describe what I do, but I like that process, and it just, here we are. That cycle is about to begin, and that'd be fun to talk about. Yet, not our topic for today.
Not our topic for today, because I thought, okay, with all of that heavy-duty work ahead of us, perhaps we should take a breath and have a fun discussion about what we're reading, watching, playing again. I'm a big advocate for this idea of taking a breath before diving into big projects. I've been practicing it for the last decade or more, actually 15 years now. The first time I did it was when I took an entire month off from like drawing anything for work and just played Metroid Prime for a month, like with all my off hours, right? Just to get it out of my system, live in that world for a while, because I knew come February of the following year, I've got a slog ahead of me, right? So you want to do that? You want to have a fun discussion about what we're reading, watching, playing this week?
I would like to have the discussion, but I actually want to do what you just said he did. Yeah, let's. That sounds like a really great time. But
man,
dabbling is fine too.
It does sound like a good idea to take a month off from like all extracurricular projects, right? Oh man, yeah, I'm tempting myself. How bad would it be? What fires would start if I just took a month? Like if I scheduled it out, right, and tell all my clients, okay, I'm not taking anything on for like March of 2018. And tell all of my collaborators, like, don't email me. I won't look. You know, it's going to be me and the game, the Nintendo Switch over there, right? Which I don't have yet, but I'd get it for that. So maybe when Metroid Prime 4 comes out, I'll take myself up on that offer.
Special holiday, yes. All right.
Yeah. All right, but
yet another future topic. All right.
So, reading, watching, playing. Let's hit the music. Let's go for it. There it is. The signal that we are now talking about the main topic. And I should tease that the second half of the show, we're actually going to do a curveball. We're bringing back the curveball for a little tiny bit, which we'll explain in more detail. Yeah. We'll explain what a curveball is in more detail later, I guess, right?
Yeah, especially because it's been a while.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it?
Well, okay. So reading, watching, playing. This is the stuff. I mean, it's not quite the month of leisure time spent only for, I don't know, rejuvenating things, because a lot of times when you're working on you know, having a day job and your side projects take up a bunch of leisure. And I think, I mean, maybe, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jerzy, but like if you get into a pattern where it's like, hey, I've built my capacity up and now I'm taking on more stuff and it's working well, I'm productive and what have you, and then over time you can be like, well, what's a movie? Did games come out this year or whatever? Maybe not quite that extreme, but like, you know, it's so this little, like, I love that we do this as a topic from time to time, because it's almost like a check-in, and like, hopefully, you know, I've made it important to take time to you know, delve into other people's creative output, and you know, get energy from that, and just chill out and stuff like that.
Yes. This is all about balance, right? I was having a conversation with a former student of mine who's going off to college, and they were telling me how they were chuckling in a somewhat empathetic and somewhat derisive way at these freshmen who are coming into college, saying like, what, we have to draw for 3 hours for studio art class, you know? And they're saying like, oh, how cute, you think 3 hours is a long time to draw, you know, because they've been working really hard leading up to getting into college. And I'm like, yes, that's funny, but let's not forget, let's not glamorize, let's not turn you know, effort into a fetish object, right?
No doubt. Yes, what a great explicit point to make, because yeah, it would be, you can get in that mode where it's like, hey, I built up this capacity, this feels great, I'm going to tell this story of you know, based on my survivor and narrative bias of, hey, work hard infinitely, and that's better for some reason. And yeah, but I mean, it can lead to,
I'm just remembering the end of that conversation is that student saying to me, "Oh, that's right. I remember when you were working on the Warren Commission report, and like that was the time when you became old." They were like, I saw you before and I saw you after. And I was like, "Oh, he aged after that." I'm like, "Yeah, like it wasn't cool. I don't feel proud of that."
Like, what happened in the Arthurian legend where it was kind of like that, where didn't Arthur lose Excalibur or something, or they were hunting for the
questing beast,
the
or whatever.
Holy Grail. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Holy Grail. But yes, you come back and you're somehow, you know, you got that gray streak through your hair. Poltergeist, right? The mom engages with the ghost of Poltergeist. At the end, she's got the gray streak in her hair. That kind of thing. But anyway, yes, let's not. So these episodes these ones where we do reading, watching, playing is a reminder to ourselves as well as everybody else. Yes, thinking hard about stuff is super important, and working hard is super important, but also backing away, disengaging, and engaging with the world in a more playful way recharges the batteries, teaches you in very different ways, and it also just helps you be a human. You know, if you'll permit me, Rob. You know, you can't be He-Man all the time. You have to put the power down and be Prince Adam. Otherwise, you're a monster, right?
That's always a solid point. So, no forgiveness needed. Yeah. So that's yes. So being able to celebrating switching gears, and you know, disconnecting from hard work severity stuff, and honestly, that's super funny, because now we're about to podcast, and you'll see that, like, talking about these things, they don't live in a vacuum where it's like, oh, my brain went to vacation town and it was a totally different brain there. It's so weird. I have no thoughts about what I experienced. It's like, there's totally, like, fresh perspective and things you'll carry with you in your other projects, which is super obvious, but I needed to be reminded of that from time to time. So, here we go.
So, you want to start?
Okay. Well, not going to say anything about it, but maybe one thing. Saw The Last Jedi.
As did I.
Awesome. Two things. I loved it.
Two things. Yeah.
That's one. No spoilers, what have you. And I can understand people's reaction to it, and I would love if it was more of a dialogue between perspectives and generations, instead of like there's a lot of people mad, and it's okay. They have their feelings and they're going to go through it, but what if it were more of a dialogue?
And what if it were more of I'm angry and disappointed about this thing. Oh, you didn't feel that way? Why didn't you feel that way? That's interesting, because maybe I missed something. Maybe your perspective will help me chart a course through my healing process in the way I dealt with this thing, in the way I felt about this thing. Or not. Maybe I'll still be, nope, I'm still disappointed on it. I still don't like it, you know? Which is legit. You get to do that.
Totally.
Everybody gets to like and dislike things. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I saw it too. I don't think I in general liked it a lot. I don't think I have any quibbles with it or anything. I just think it's a situation where I just don't have that much skin in the game. I feel like I've kind of disengaged from that whole thing. I don't feel quite as there wasn't that huge thrill of anticipation when it came up on the screen or anything. I was just like, okay, here we go again. But everything that they did in it, I thought it was good. It was good. I like that it was who it was for.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, I mean, not can't go into too much depth because there's no spoilers, right? So,
right.
Essentially, okay, little reaction that happened.
Yeah, and I want to be careful not to color anybody's because I know some people they don't even like spoilers how other people felt about the thing and why, right? So just I guess in a general sense,
Jerzy, I'm certainly saying, yeah, that's it. This simple facts, no delving into it. Not till I don't know when it makes sense to delve into it. Maybe we could talk about episode 7 at some point.
That's true. We could.
8. So since 8 is out, then maybe that could be our rule of thumb. I don't know. Maybe we could make that an extra lean.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
Do like a reaction to episodes. I need to watch it again. I haven't seen it, I think, since it was in the theater. So.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, food for thought. Podcast that generates podcasts. So what, let's see that I haven't been watching that much else really, because it's more been like listening, reading, playing.
What are you listening to?
Oh, I've recently encountered sort of, 1980s, inspired synth music, but yet it's new stuff, right? It's new creations, made like a year, 2, 3, 4 years ago, right? And the one in particular that I really thought was awesome is this. I think the band is called Mega Drive, and the album is called 198XAD, 198XAD. I don't know how to pronounce the thing, but it's it does. I don't know if this is the official album art for it, but it is a sweet cyber skull thing with eyes. It's ambient. There are no lyrics, and it has a nice groove to it. And as much as guitar speaks to me, especially guitar with a little bit of a distortion, some textured synth sound, it's pretty enjoyable for me. So if you're into that kind of thing, this has been like my background soundtrack when I'm cranking on anything.
How long
writing,
is this video?
drawing.
Oh, this is an hour of music on this YouTube video.
Yeah, it's the whole album. In that I think we'll probably link to in our show notes.
Mega Drive 198 XAD full album.
Mm-hmm. It's got different moods and tone. It's not all ambient. It's not all intense, but it'll carry you through some waves, some ups, some downs.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So we will link to that in the show notes for sure. Any other music that you've been?
Oh,
or is that the only music?
I play things from my library in Apple iTunes and stuff. But it's I don't know. are you a user of the built-in Apple Music app in the iOS ecosystem?
No, I am not. I'm still in the Google Play world because I understand that Apple Music now does the same thing where it's you can keep all your music in the cloud and then stream it as you want it kind of thing. Are they doing that now? Yeah. Yeah,
and if you pay for the membership to, I don't know whatever it's, if it's an Apple Music membership or something, and then you have the ability to stream or cache download pretty much everything in the iTunes library. And which is a similar concept to Amazon has a membership like that. So does so does Google, right? And And the one that Google has, I think, comes with YouTube Red. So that's an interesting arrangement. But there's a little bit of UI that trickery that I like in the Apple ecosystem, where it has a playlist that I don't know how frequently it automatically regenerates, but it's like every week or so maybe. And it's like it's the My Favorites playlist. So it's a handy that's a handy thing. I'll dive into that as well. And I guess if I thought about podcasts, I mean, I do listen to some podcasts. A recent new one worth mentioning is it's called Omnibus. And I forgot to put this in show notes, but Omnibus is a podcast that picks a bit of trivia from recent decades and talks all about it. And it's what is it, Ken Jennings and John Roderick, and their whole like conceit to it reminds me a little bit of like Galaxy of Super Adventure, right? Because they've got this not quite as fun Muppety influenced, right? But they act as if they're putting this trivia ephemera into a time capsule for future generations, because they don't want people to forget what the Rachel hairdo was, or what a Tesseract is. The Tesseract episode is fantastic, so that's a good one to try out. There you go. How about you, Jerzy? I don't know.
What have I been listening to?
Yeah, listening, sure.
I'll respond with listening, because actually, I've just been in the middle of a couple of drawing deadlines where and the nice thing about that particular period of a project is like that's when I actually get to listen to stuff again, like the writing, the thumbnailing. I don't get to listen to much except for maybe like classical music or like music without words in it. But once I'm in drawing mode, it's like, okay, I can consume information again. And I had been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I was really going through this whole thing, and I think we talked about this in the last Reading, Watching, Playing, where I've been listening to a lot of conservative and a lot of liberal podcasts to like try to get some kind of sense of what are the arguments and how are people framing them up. But I had to take a break. It was getting too hot, too contentious, too many people angry. I'm like, okay, I need to step away from this for a second, because I'm finding myself feeling anxious outside of that sphere, right? Like in my daily life, I'm feeling more anxious. Okay, take a break.
Wow, so, I was so curious. So like, I can't imagine that wouldn't come with like, it must come with some positive side effects. Like what that sounds like but yet an intense experiment that would have to have other, like some trade-offs to it, right?
I would say
just like,
yeah, like
being in a bubble is a problem too, but then you're breaking out of it, but then
30% of the time I'm getting perspective that I wouldn't normally get, right? Like, oh, I'm listening to like this really lefty show. I'm like, whoa, they are saying things that even my circles of friends aren't saying. Then I listen to these right-wing shows. I'm like, okay, that's a perspective I hadn't considered when navigating this problem. But then like the other 70% is people being really angry and demonizing each other. And I've had a really difficult time finding level-headed. Like the closest thing to a level-headed thing I found is like the 538 podcast, but they're mostly talking about statistics and polls and, data analysis, which is less about navigating the complexity of the issue, if that makes any sense, right? Anyway, I didn't want to go on that. That's just to say, like, I had to take a break. So what did I go to when I took a break? And recently I was hanging out with some friends, and the topic of C.S. Lewis's books came up. And I was reminded about how much I loved Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis. I haven't talked about this one in a while, but it's it's part of a trilogy called the Space Trilogy, which is like, I've read those books I don't know how many times, all three. They're not huge books, but they're bigger than Narnia. It's like he described it as a science fiction fairy tale for grown-ups. And Out of the Silent Planet is the story of this language expert, a philologist, who gets abducted by two Earth people and taken to this alien planet called Malacandra. And it's in our solar system, but because Malacandra is what the inhabitants on that planet call it, right? So it's him trying to figure out where he is, why they brought him there. It's C.S. Lewis, so there's like some Christian stuff in there. But I just love the way he writes. I love the analogies he draws. I like the metaphors he uses, and I love how he crafts a very visible world with words. I see the worlds that he writes about. So I've been listening to the audio book of that, and it's been very, very soothing to have on in the background. If I were to describe the series, it's he's using science fiction to make a analogy for his views on Christianity, which is what the Narnia books were. Although when I engage with them, I can say yes, that's nice, but there's cheetahs running around and fighting monsters, right? Like when I watch Narnia, it's like there's a centaur, there's a talking cheetah. This is great. Oh, there's a really beautiful lion who has a really nice voice who's helping everybody. That's terrific. It's kids being brave. All right, I'm in. Out of the space trilogy is the same way for me, where it's like, okay, yep, that's supposed to be an angel, right? And they're talking about God and the devil right now, but he does such a good job of explaining. He really thought about the science as best as he could in 1938 as to how all the space travel would work and like what the physics of a world with less or more gravity would be like, how the inhabitants would be different. And he really, I think, paints a really interesting kind of to spoil a little bit of Out of the Silent Planet. He lands on a planet with 3 distinct species who are all intelligent. And how they negotiate their societies is also super interesting to me. So, but yeah, it's a great book. I can't believe it's been like almost 10 years since I've read it, and I don't know why I've taken so long to come back to it.
So it sounds great. I need to revisit that. I haven't really visited C.S. Lewis's writing since I was before I was a teenager, I think. So got a lot out there. Is the audiobook from Audible? Or
I think it's on Audible.
Okay, I'll have to look at it.
Yeah, I was on the Goodreads page that I pulled up on the screen, but I'll have to look if it's on Audible now.
Okay.
If it is, I will link to it in the show notes. There are other more nefarious means you can come by it. But.
I imagine. There's the old internet. Lots of corners and stuff, angles, places. So one thing I forgot to mention that I've been listening to is an audiobook, and I tend to throw my audiobooks into the reading category, but technically I'm listening, I suppose. And I've been going through one of the Great Courses books that are on Audible. That's like the Great Courses is a whole business series thing that you can get into on its own through its own purchasing presence and stuff, but they offer lots of stuff on Audible, and since I'm I keep my membership going there where I get like a token a month, and it encourages me to dive into there anyway. And I'm reading the book Anthropology and the Study of Humanity, which is by the Great Courses and taught by Professor Scott M. Lacey.
Oh, there was a little bit of like bandwidth crunching that happened there. Could you repeat that title?
Oh, sure. Anthropology and the Study of Humanity. Yeah. And so, I mean, essentially you have a series of lectures that are, pretty fascinating. And it's it's a bit of a breakdown of, building up layer by layer of like what is it to be human, and what are different angles that we can consider when looking at that from an evolutionary standpoint. And then I haven't got into the further stuff where I'm sure that there is going to be a cultural and some behavioral stuff in there too, but haven't got there yet. But I'm really enjoying it so far. About 5 or so lectures in.
Okay, so you were responding to my earlier talk about podcasts by saying that sounds intense. What you just said sounds like that's intense. So you're taking like a class, essentially. You're sitting in lectures for a class.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's not. I don't have the pressure of being graded, so that's nice. And there's a sweet spot. So I suppose, okay, so it's a matter of challenge level. So if I were taking if I jumped into physics or like some kind of topic that I maybe have only that slightest familiarity with, but things that are related to human factors and psychology and stuff. I've read enough books over the years where it's not that challenging of a leap. There's just enough challenge where it has me hooked and excited to follow along with the lectures. But like if you're brand new to it, it may not be relaxing. And it definitely does. Like you mentioned earlier, like I couldn't do like tasks where I needed to generate new words, right? I wouldn't be even outlining anything or even doing a mind map. But I can draw when I listen to that kind of thing. So it's, everyone's mileage varies, I suppose, with that. Yeah, and I think that's probably why I have avoided so far some of the great courses things in my playlist where I thought, that's a little too challenging right now. So I can identify with that.
Speaking of, while we're talking about watching videos and listening to lectures and things, I did a Thunder Punch Daily during Art Sound Off in November. It was comicsagreat.com/TPD252, Thunder Punch Daily episode 252, where I mentioned that YouTube is to podcast as Spotify is to iTunes for me. And I rely on YouTube a lot to help me, like when we're talking about listening to like conservative and left-wing politic podcasts, part of the way I find these different sources is by just letting YouTube recommendations happen. So I find an interesting talk, and then it's like, okay, listeners or viewers who watch this also watch these, and then I start like these deep dives into stuff. And then the next thing I know, my YouTube homepage is like this huge collection of recommendations. Not always great. Like it sometimes leads me down some very nasty paths where it's like, okay, well now I've gone from like conservative politic discussion to like people who are trolling people. I've gone from left-wing politic discussion to people who are screaming at people, right? It's like, okay, well, I understand your pain, I understand why you're angry, but that doesn't help me. So even if you don't have an Audible account, something that I found to be exceedingly useful is just using YouTube as my my Spotify for like spoken word stuff.
This, like, your recommendation engine must either be super great, like that algorithm is either very helpful, but I would imagine it's almost like you have multiple personas that I don't know if their algorithm would really keep up with that, right? Where it's like you're sending these different signals that might be hard. Where, like, for instance, my YouTube recommendations, I get a lot of like maker stuff, TED Ed, right? Have you ever encountered the TED Ed video stuff? Whatever. Yeah.
Oh yeah, those have shown up in my feed as well. Yeah.
Then but I don't know if maybe it's super smart and robust where it's not you didn't break it, but
no,
I would consider making a separate account. Is my thought.
That's probably a really good idea because it does break from time to time, right? So like there was one day where I listened to a couple different Jordan Peterson videos, lectures, and then like the next day it was like a whole bunch of like not only his stuff, but then like a lot of like really like unuseful stuff, like a lot of like I think it was supposed to be funny, but like it was my whole feed, and so like when that happens, I have to sort of course correct and go, okay, now I have to like actually use the search box and search for things that are counterpoint to that to balance it out, right?
Wow.
So it does.
That's a tough. Yeah. It's almost like you're really throwing a lot of different flavors into that stew, and sooner or later it may not taste so good.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea to actually like make a separate YouTube account. I hadn't thought about that.
It's promising to hear that. Like it's almost like you're able to tune it still. It's not like it's become unchangeable. So that's neat to hear. But all right,
actually. Yeah, it is. Right. It's fairly malleable, right? It's fairly easy to course correct it. But like if you do more, I've noticed if you do more than 2 hours of anything, it's like, oh, that's what you're really into now. Bam! Here's a whole bunch of that stuff. Like, oh no. So I have to keep going. It's kind of like I remember hearing somebody once talk about like how to use Facebook, and it's like they're talking about like how you have to like basically teach the algorithm of like what you actually really want, and it just sounded like a lot of work. And I realized that's kind of what I'm doing with my YouTube account. So maybe my recommendation isn't such a good recommendation unless you have the time to monkey with it.
Well, I didn't want to counter it. I just thought, like, I'm just throwing a different angle to like go on that adventurous exploration that you're describing. But maybe, you know, if you have a really tuned, well-tuned feed, maybe it's nice to keep it well-tuned. That's all. Well, what about playing? What do you think?
Playing? Oh, do we want to talk about that? Yeah. How about you go first?
Okay, no problem. I know. I think I've been I've been making time to dive into some things, and it's super funny. Like what comes up as like I think it's common for people who have video gaming as a hobby to have sort of a backlog of games because things go on sale, especially you have Steam and good old games and whatnot. And especially during this time of year, there are incredible sales. And, oh gosh, Humble Bundle. That's another place where all of a sudden you could be like, well, I got 10 games for the price of half of a game. And, that's neat. But, you know, so it's kind of funny what all of a sudden will jump a game up in priority for me. And I'm playing Zelda Breath of the Wild again, and it's because of an expansion that was released, and it's called the Champions
I saw
Ballad.
a bunch of screen grabs of this.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it's not because of, there's all these new temples to explore and puzzles to solve. It's because there's a motorcycle in it, and because the game is hilly, and I want to jump a motorcycle. That's it. And I want to zoom around the landscape of Hyrule on a motorcycle. But you can't have the motorcycle unless you have defeated 4 of like the 4 big milestone kind of bosses and puzzles in the game, which they're called the Divine Beasts. So if you've beaten the 4 Divine Beasts, you get to, zoom around Hyrule on a motorcycle. And that is pretty much my main ambition for the game. It's like I play it to relax. It's like a wind down thing before bed. And, with that playing style, I don't go after the super challenging puzzles. I'll fight a giant if I run into one. But for the most part, I'm climbing rocks and hang gliding. Until this darn carrot of like is being waved in front of me of like, ooh, motorcycle. And I'm like, now I got to beat the Divine Beasts. And so what a silly pain to have, but here I am. And now I'm productive in the game again because I want a motorcycle. And as soon as I get it, I will become unproductive again in the game. And just chill out with it. Anyway, fun thing. I don't have the motorcycle yet. I've got one more of those beasts to go. So
I know what you're talking about. I mean, I was talking about Metroid at the top of the episode. That's the game I'm still playing 15 minutes at a whack every once in a while. Except I got stuck on a mini boss. I'll pull up the video on that because if anybody hasn't seen, oh god, this game is so good. I'm talking about Metroid Return of Samus for the 3DS. Pull it up and hit play.
It's really good.
But this is the guy I'm stuck on.
Okay.
And they'll play like the little opening video for the scene. Oh, come on, get out of there, Ad. This guy called the Digger Knot.
Uh-oh. Looks serious. It's got beefy arms, got spider legs. Samus in its sights.
And it's one of those battles where you have to fight there's like 3 fight modes, right? Where this first one, like you see those 2 big legs with the big purple dots, so it's like, okay, well those are the first things I have to take out. But if these rollers that he throws out here, see this? If those even touch you, you're dead.
No.
Well, no, they're not just, that's an earlier fight with him, but in this one it like takes off an immense amount of damage. So it's all about dodging, which is fine. But then You have to fight the rollers, then you have to fight his face, and then you have to fight his face again. So,
wow.
yes. Anyway.
Okay, that's a lot of work. That's impressive. But you have all those abilities that person who's playing Samus has. You've got all those fancy.
Oh, yeah. I'm about 60% through the game. So I have, I have everything except I think the power bomb is waiting on the other side of the digger knot. But I've got like space jump, screw attack, spider ball, bomb, super missile, all of the Aeon abilities, and then whatever that green beam is, it's plasma beam, I think. This particular guy, this mini boss, it's like a 7-minute fight if you do everything right. I don't do everything right, and so then it's like that's another 7 minutes. Well, that means I can only fight the mini boss twice in my allotted 15 minutes, like every couple days to play the game. So it's at a point where I'm really frustrated. I throw the controller or the system down. I'm like, all right, I'm just not touching it for a few days because I got too much work to do to be like. I want to play it the way you want to play with the motorcycle. It's like I just want to be delighted for a little bit, I don't want to be grinding on this one, but I'm eager to get back to it now. Every New Year's Day, one of the things that Ann and I do is we hook up old game systems and we stay in bed all day and we eat really bad food and we play a whole bunch of old NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis, and N64 and GameCube games all day. So I've got that to look forward to.
Oh, that's awesome! Nice way to
Bad
celebrate
Dudes
a holiday.
being high on that list.
Oh yeah, Bad Dudes.
Bad Dudes, both NES G.I. Joe games, which are they're not great. But they're fun, right? It's like these games, I don't go to them going like, oh, I'm getting lost in this world or anything. It's like, no, I'm just doing a platformer where I get to play 4 different G.I. Joe guys, and like now they made like some kind of weird mini boss out of like a Cobra figure, or like the Kool-Aid Man game, which is like it's an Atari game. There's really only one thing that you do in an Atari game, right? It's like unless you're playing E.T. or Indiana Jones, then it's like, what am I doing? But it's a lot of fun.
Beautiful. So, all right. I mean, I think that's a pretty good sample of things that we've been like media stuff that we explored in recent times. Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think?
Is it time to go to the second half of the show?
Yeah, maybe do that curveball.
All right, time to do the curveball in a second. By the way, Joseph Coco's in the chat, and he says if he's agreeing with you. He says if you have a YouTube Red, or if you have YouTube Red, I'd recommend creating a separate dummy channel rather than a separate account, so you can still use Red.
That makes sense. I haven't tried that.
I haven't either. I need to play with YouTube a little bit more. I'm finding I'm getting a lot of value out of it, so maybe I should get a Red account. Anyway, in about 1 minute and 30 seconds, we're going to dive into some leaner messages. It was actually posted on our Patreon about why is it so hard to work on projects that we care so much about. We're going to dig at that a little bit. But before we do that, we got to thank some people who make this show possible, and those people happen to be the folks who support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/leanintoart. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote, right? Like $1 a month to say, like, we believe in you, we believe in the stuff that you do, we get a lot of value out of the way you guys dig really hard and deep at these topics. So here, let's make the show more sustainable by giving us your support. And we want to thank 5 people who have been doing exactly that. First up, Mike White. Mike White you can find on Instagram at FE Follies. He's actually been posting comic strips there. Jesse Kaufman, dear friend Jesse Kaufman, friend of the show, been on the show before. You can find Jesse on Twitter at Jesse Kaufman, KAUFFMAN. And then the mysterious K. We don't know who you are. We don't know what your name is, but we are grateful that you find value in what we do and support it. Shawnee Redfearn. You can find Shawnee on Twitter at Shawnee Redfearn. And finally, our old buddy Brandon Dayton at Brandon Dayton on Twitter. Thanks to all of you for believing in us and what we do. And if you want to go to patreon.com/leanintoart, you will find all the shows we produce there, as well as the extra leans. the shows that we record in between the main shows, where Rob and I riff on a topic and sort of find our way to the topic, and then that post becomes an open mic post where you can comment and talk about whatever you want with us there, and in a safe place where only fellow leaners hang out. We want to thank everybody who has been supporting us there, and anybody who's recommended us to people, telling people about our Patreon. That means a lot to us.
It really does, and thank you very much. Well, here we are at Curveball, and I haven't pulled it up. Do you have the Curveball?
I do. I'm going to read it. Let me play some music to get us there.
All right.
All right. This one comes from Olivia Birdton, supporting us on Patreon. Olivia asks, is there an episode that addresses why it's so hard sometimes to work on projects you care a lot about and what to do about it? Now, I feel like we kind of walked around this a little bit in the Pep Talk episode a few weeks back. In that I was sort of doing a modeling exercise where I say, well, here's something I'm worried about right now. Rob, talk me off the ledge thing. And it happened to be about a project I was hesitated to dive into, and the conclusion that we kind of came to, both the chat room and the two of us came to, was that I'm probably feeling a lot of resistance because this project means a lot to me, right? So there's a case in point, is that I noticed that I can playfully and joyfully engage with freelance gigs where I'm being paid to do it, but it's ultimately for somebody else. But when it comes to doing my own work that I don't get paid for, which you would think there's no stakes here. I'm not going to get fired. I can't get fired. I cannot get fired for my own thing. Right? Why would I drag my feet on it? Why would I be so hesitant? Why is it so darn hard to do things that mean a lot to you? Right?
Well, I don't know if we went into this explicitly, but one way I think of that problem is it's internal versus external life. So your project comes from you. You are seeking to do this not because of some kind of necessarily external reward as the initial thing, or like the start. Like there's really it's like you believe in this, and maybe you have thought it through where you feel like, yeah, this is a credible business idea, in addition to being something I know I can make, and I may even feel confident that people will want this or have asked me to do things, whatever. I mean, you have signals all over the place, but in the end, it's like your ownership makes it so internal, and so what's at stake? It's like your own sense of not that this is a great thing, but I'm just thinking this through here. It may not be the same for everybody, but like I feel like it's my personal projects. There's so much me in them that like if it's failed, I'm a failure, right? If it doesn't live up to some expectation. Like whether it's the quality I wanted to put out in the world, whether it's the time and resources I wanted to put into it, the reaction that it got or didn't get. I mean, that's a lot of things that I can go ahead and take personal, as opposed to the external. Like it's so totally not as vulnerable because you're outside of your own personal stakes compared to, like, okay, your reputation, your relationship with a client or what have you, right? But those are outside of you. So yeah. I don't know that. What do you think?
Oh my gosh. If I fail on a project for a client, that feels terrible. That feels really awful. But it is something where I haven't exposed myself to the world in any kind of sense. That relationship is strictly between me and the client, right? And I have failed on projects in the past.
Oh, and as have I. Yes.
The computer's doing something. And while that feeling is never a good feeling, it doesn't feel the same as like getting in front of a group of my peers and doing some kind of performance or sharing something about my work. Like that's like flop sweat. That's mouth is dry kind of fear. And I feel like there's something shared in the DNA between that and putting something that means a lot to me out in the world. Because yes, if I say, like a joke I said in a talk one time is like, you work hard on a project for 5 years, you hand it to some relative of yours, say, here's 5 years of my life on paper, and they say, that's great, and they throw it in the trunk of a car. Like that kind of crushing feeling that can happen when this is my soul on paper, right? So yeah, it feels like there's a huge amount of stakes in that.
Well, it's like the perspective, right, is so different because that is from you. And literally, if you're doing something for someone else, it's easy to see other criteria. And honestly, it's not functionally, physically, technically that different of a thing. Like you can literally make the same kind of product for you or for someone else. A comic, a game, an illustration, anything. But yeah, maybe the personal impact because of your I don't know, beliefs and internal vulnerable stakes are on the line. Can be. I don't know, because
can be
maybe.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's not the only thing I think that stands as a point of friction with, why is it so hard working on your creative projects?
Wow, we're getting some serious bandwidth crunching.
Are we?
I don't know if that's me or you. Like that last sentence was like super choppy. It's hard to make out.
Rats. All right. Well,
while you check to
right.
see if there's anything running, I'll respond to what you just said, because yes, that can be part of it for sure. The other part of it, I think, is something that is in part of every project, but I think it becomes inhibited the moment that you get like some clear parameters on deliverables, right? When I work for a client, there's a clear date where everything is supposed to be delivered, and that helps shape the project. Like the deadline, the amount of resources I have, the tools I use, those all shape what the project will become. So putting that aside for a second, with that as like a sidebar sort of like caveat, any project that you start, there's a bit of ambiguity at the beginning, and you're looking at it going like, well, this is what I think it looks like in my head. There's this resistance that happens to the moment I throw it on the line, it might be the wrong line. And I think I see what it looks like in my head. Or maybe you don't. Maybe it's like it's an ill-formed thing where I just want it to feel like this. Well, what lines are the right lines to throw down to actually get to that, right? Oh, I don't even know where to start. And sometimes it's just a matter of just like throwing down those lines to get started. And a deadline helps with that. A deadline is a huge, huge incentive to like put those initial lines down to get moving so you can reach that deadline and fulfill your contract with the client. At least me, when I'm doing my personal work and there is no real clear deadline, it's a lot harder to move because that ambiguity feels even bigger, more expansive. This is potentially 3 years of my life I'm talking about when I think about this project. I don't want to start it and head off in the wrong direction. I don't want to have to do anything over. And the way I was able to sort of see that in myself was when this was last October, when I did the Boulder and Fleet Comic A Friendly Game, where I said, you know what, I've been kicking around this story where they go play a game to solve a conflict for like 2 years. I'm just going to do it for Inktober. I'm going to plot it as a 24-page comic in 2 weeks so that I can draw a page a day for Inktober and ship whatever comes out the other end, right? So I basically made a false deadline, but it wasn't a false deadline in that it was a public deadline associated with an event that lots of people were watching, right? So I made myself super accountable to something in my mind, right? Because people say, well, make all of your own internal deadlines. Yeah, I do that. I do make internal deadlines, and I don't always stick to them because there's lots of push and pull between my professional life, my personal life, and then my side projects, right? That was one thing where it's like, again, the deadline shaped the project, and I made a lot of concessions and, what am I trying to say? Design choices based on how much resources I knew I would have in that time period. And that was how I was able to finally ship that story.
I think there's so much valuable in what you said that I want to.
I packed a lot into a little story, didn't I?
No, I want to run the risk of no. It stands on its own, but I do want to run back and hang some lampshades. That's all, because to say like these are really interesting elements that form a system, right? That you may have some kind of fear or resistance toward making the thing, and whatever that reason is, if it's the intrinsic thing that we went on about, or if it's it's really meaningful, and that okay, and it's scary to be like, I care so much, what's going to happen? To me, in a way, that's like this fundamental. You may have a lot of stuff in your concept that will not be tested in the world. So in a way that I think of assumptions that we have about this story will feel a certain way. These designs are going to look a certain way, and like they'll have a certain impact. Well, what about when you bring all the elements together and really put it in someone's hands, right? That's when you're going to know and not have any more assumptions about like how is it performing? How does it work to you facing your own work when it's in a shareable, ready state is a different experience than when it has some level of it's conceptual, it's a draft, it's work in progress, whatever. That's a different situation to be in versus being able to face it right in its whole, in a complete form. But then, and also the byproduct of being able to put it in someone else's hands. And you mentioned a system of constraints to adopt, where you make a commitment, and you've worked through budgeting your resources as far as time and materials or whatever it's going to take for you to bring about that commitment. General attributes of the project to say, well, whatever happens, I'm going to crank it out in daily increments, and it'll be done in this time frame. We talked about mini comics. That represents, like, you can shop around for like a system and say, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try an art challenge. I'm going to try anyone's technique that you like, but then hopefully, if it's new to you, you're thinking about setting yourself up to succeed more than setting yourself up for some a really hurtful, scary experience. Like a mini comic is so awesome to test ideas and to practice. And if you've not put out any comics yet, well, it's a wonderful place to start. Even if you don't have a huge affection for it as the medium, you're like, well, graphic novels, that's where it's at. Or if you're like epic adventure game, that's where it's at. Maybe you want to make a single screen action thing, or a simple or a short branching narrative with one of the engines out there that exists. So either way, you're adapting someone else's system to give you a foothold on making your problem simpler, and so you can really experience it when it's out in some shareable form. I don't know. You said
Agreed.
it a lot. Your story was awesome and fun, but
yours was more clear and instructive. That's why we work well together, Rob. And I love it when and Jesse recently pointed this out to me, is that sometimes when it's the two of us together, what really works is that I explore an idea down to the end, and then Rob goes, and then takes it into like another interesting place just to provide another point of view, another perspective. And I feel like that's part of the reason I like doing this show, is I feel like we hit a fairly expansive look at an idea as we drill down deep into it. But to keep building on this idea, where was I going to go with that? I had a conversation recently with Dan Michigan about a project he and I are going to take on next year. and it's gonna be a webcomic of some sort, right? And Dan had the presence of mind to ask me, so I'm gonna draw it. He said, how would you, how did he phrase it? He was essentially asking me how committed I was to these pages being the final version. In other words, let's do this comic. What happens if a publisher picks it up and they're like, well, it needs a lot of reworking in order to turn it into a book? And we talked about it a little bit. And finally, I looked Dan in the eye and I said, yeah, you know what? I think I'm okay with this being the first draft. And if we want to do something different with it, is when we package it up, if we either do a Kickstarter for it or if we get it picked up by a publisher, I'm fine with redrawing entire chunks of the thing if that comes to that. And that felt so incredibly liberating to me. That just took such a weight off. And I say this knowing that in years past, going back like maybe a decade into doing these audio discussions about comics, I have highlighted the peril of redrawing previous work, right? Because this was something that happened a lot with early webcomics. Like, well, you draw 5 chapters and it's like, oh, now I've improved so much and now chapter 1 looks like garbage to me. I'm going to go back and redraw chapter 1 to bring it up to snuff with chapter 5. And you can get in this endless cycle of revision, right? You can just revise this thing to the point where it's no longer a living thing. With that in mind, also the idea that suppose this project means a lot to you, and in that I find that I do a lot of things to try to protect myself from doing bad work, and sometimes that protection turns into stopping doing the work at all. What better protection from doing bad work than not working? But the moment I said, like, you know what, it's okay to put a draft into the world, and if I wind up having to rework things, I know I can, and it won't be that painful to go back and rework things. That also took like an enormous weight off of doing the thing, you know, doing this meaningful thing. Suddenly it's like, yes, you're doing a meaningful thing. Isn't it going to be fun, right? It changed its complexion a little bit.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And in a way, another angle, like, so I hope I'm doing because you're laying out awesome points and I don't want to ore you.
You do as well.
And this reminds me of an investment. So it's like you have your creative work is something that it isn't just being put out into the world as only expression. I mean, it's the point is to actually engage in trade with it in some way, and that's like forming any business. So when you're testing an idea for a business, are you going to go all in and you know, have all these untested assumptions that put you at a huge financial risk, or that are just kind of a mismatch for, like, this is a highly, you know, gambling or cavalier investment of your time, if you're thinking of that as part of the investment. But what you described is like, it's a more efficient, lower risk thing that you can say this project could reach a stage where it essentially gets funding from a different, you know, business partner, participant, publisher, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Same thing as like if you're developing an app or a game and you're like, well, I'm going to focus on these core features. I could wander off and do, you know, it's whatever, 100 things, or add more levels, more worlds, whatever. But what if I just focus on the important thing that let me get the draft into the world, and then we see. So that's a neat, like, investment angle, I think.
And it's funny, when I think of the word investment, typically I think of intense, like, I'm going to invest in this thing. I'm going to work really hard towards this thing. But you're talking about investment in terms of like the way we invest in a bank account. I put the money in there and I leave it be and see what it accrues, right? Mm-hmm. Investment in the sense of, let's put some effort into this thing and have a sense of what we'd like to have happen, but maybe have, gosh, this goes back to what we were talking about last week when we talk about, like, what are your motivations for doing what you do? And, like, are you going to let this one motivation define why you're doing this thing, right? Or are you gonna have multiple motivations? Or you're gonna have a different hierarchy of motivations, or you're gonna have like an even playing field of motivations. And as long as like 4 or 5 of them are being met, then it's a good thing. But thinking that that way in terms of outcomes. Like a lot of things can happen here. Here are like the top 5 things that I would like to have happen here. Whether it gets crowdfunded, whether a publisher picks it up, whether it gets bought by a company or whatever. But having a sense that, okay, I'm investing in this thing. I don't know what its ultimate end is going to be, but I'm going to focus on the bare minimum to make it happen and bring it into the world. And be ready to tweak it for whatever outcomes whatever signals you start getting, like being prepared to tweak it to move in that direction, right?
Mm. Yeah, right on. It's honestly, any constraints that you pick have huge trade-offs. Being comfortable with that. So for me, when I was early on in developing Art Geek Zoo, and I finally just let myself start publishing, I was scared out of my mind, and I just went ahead and did it. And then, if you happen to check out artgeekzoo.com, you'll see how much that whole project changed over time. And I forced myself to keep moving forward, and even though so much about it where it was evolving, especially chapter by chapter. But yet, I got to put something into the world, and I got that practice and what have you. That was an example of just being willing to face for me, like where I was at with those trade-offs, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't like, and then it was a giant success, or now it's but like right. It's been the lessons I take from that are moving forward, like you described, where it's okay to put a draft out in the world. That's to me, in my past work, that project certainly exemplifies that idea.
And you know what? I mean, I think it's appropriate that putting that stuff out in the world for the first time feels momentous. It should feel that way because it is a big step. You're crossing a huge threshold when you decide, okay, I'm going to put my work in front of people and say, I'm ready for your response, right? That's no matter what the project is, there's like some personal element of vulnerability that you're accepting when you make that step. It gets easier after that. Like, it doesn't feel momentous every time I post a new thing to the internet. But so on the one hand, it's like I want to honor that step. Like, wow, you did it. You put a thing out in the world. Now keep doing it, right? But on the other hand, I also want to acknowledge and not diminish the fear that one should feel in making that first step too, right? Those are both very real and very appropriate, I think.
That's so cool. I wish I had you as an art teacher. Well, I do. Honestly, I do. So, come to think of it, I meant a long time ago.
Right. Well, that's kind of you say. I hope that I am. I hope I'm that good. I hope I help kids that much, I should say. All right. Anything else left to say about that? Or are we getting towards final thought?
Oh, I think we're definitely in the final thought territory. And
all right,
we're gonna try to do one more take on the curveball. We're gonna try to unite these topics.
Right, we can try. Yeah, that'll be an interesting idea. Oh man, you do this again? You're gonna like try to hit us with a big one? Like try to figure out what's the narrative thread between the curveball this week and the reading, watching, playing that we did?
Sure, let's try.
Sure, why not? We might crash and burn, but that's why we keep. What?
We'll time box it. How about
Okay.
We'll say if we can't do it in like 2 minutes, we'll be like, hey, that was that's a worthwhile failure.
There we go.
Good attempt. All right.
Driving is where one finds interesting stuff. All right, so it's time to thank a couple more people who make this show possible, and those people happen to be us. We are, we make. I introduce myself as a cartoonist and teaching artist, which means I make comics. And the comic that I hope you'll check out, and I just mentioned moments ago, is Boulder and Fleet: Adventures for Hire. A story in which two best friends, a bird and a bear, go on adventures together and fight all sorts of different animal monsters. Oh, whoa, I'm flipping through all my tabs. Animal monsters, bug monsters, and mineral people. And I do want to point people to the Tiny Astronaut Etsy store, where you can actually purchase print editions of the Boulder and Fleet comics, including this one here. This is something I haven't been making any noise about. I did a collection of my Inktober sketches from 2015 as a printed book that you can get at the tinyastronaut.com web store. But also my mini comics, the Boulder and Fleet mini comics, can be purchased there as well. So you can hold it in your hand. You can read the webcomic at boulderandfleet.com, and you can hold it in your hand and enjoy it, without the aid of an electronic device.
Oh, and the mini comic is amazing, right? Because I mean that's the one you printed up with does that have the what's it called, that press cover, the
letterpress cover?
Letterpress. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so we chronicled this, I think, on the Lean Into Art cast. So yes, the friendly game I printed up as a mini comic. You can see here. This is actually one of the early editions, where I actually tried screen printing and letterpressing. It didn't work out all that well, but that you can see what the wraparound cover looks like. And in this game, or in this episode, our heroes have to face a living mulch, which you can see chasing them on the cover. And you can find that too at the tinyastronaut.com store. Rob, you introduced yourself as a coder designer. So what do you make?
Well, I make a video game called This Panda Needs You. And there's this cute little panda that is trying to solve puzzles, and you can choose to join the panda along on this adventure of like over 50 puzzles that start out super approachable and easy, and get a little more challenging over time in this pretty mellow, happy game. Panda is just walking through a bamboo forest, encounters a set of shapes, a cloud, just because it's nothing personal. But the cloud comes along and blows the shapes all over the place. And now you help the panda put everything back the way it should be, and the panda dances for you. It's wonderful. So you can play this. You're like, hey, Rob, that's fun. Sounds fine. What platforms is it on? I'm on Android. Guess what? It's available for Android. It works on your Android phones and tablets. It's available for iOS, again, on phones and tablets. It's even available for desktop on Mac OS and for Windows. So you can find out more about it at this-panda.com or search for it in your favorite app store.
Awesome. And if you have purchased it, please consider giving it a review on whatever platform you purchased it on. That helps more people find it as well. But let's say that you are, you're like, well, that's all well and good that you guys make stuff. We're more here for the way that you drill down and think hard on topics. Fair enough. This show is a product that we make, and you can find more products like that at leanintoart.com/workshops, where you can download videos that we've created, self-contained classroom experiences. You can download them at a price of your choosing. Oh, there we are. There's leanintoart.com/workshops. I've got comics workshops there. Rob's got video game workshops there. And if you've done all that stuff and you're like, well, what else can I do to help you out? If you're watching the video right now on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up helps more people discover the show. If you're listening to the show in a podcatcher like iTunes, giving the show a review, like 5-star review, that helps more people find it as well. And we thank everybody who has been doing just those things. It's
so awesome and humbling, and thank you very much. All right. Here we are. The final thought. The final interesting curveball double down, right? So we think about what are we reading, watching, and playing, and why, and then also why is it so hard working on your creative projects. Yep. I don't know. Do you have a thought, Jerzy, on that?
I think my final thought is my first thought, which is if I were to offer any kind of advice, and I don't like to offer advice, but if I were to say like how I would tackle this problem, let me put it that way. This is how I would tackle this problem. I got a project that means a lot to me. I would create some, like what Rob was suggesting earlier, borrowing somebody else's system or coming up with your own system to build some constraints into the thing so that it becomes less ambiguous, more shippable. Right? I know I can do this much per week, therefore I'm going to allot that to it. I would also, in that budgeting, budget some time for reading, watching, playing as well. Because we can start big projects with all of the enthusiasm and good intentions in the world, But if we fatigue ourselves, we're not going to do we're not going to do good work, and B, we might not stick through the long haul of making the thing happen. And there's something heartbreaking about walking away from a thing that meant a lot to you when you started.
I think that is a fantastic connection. There's there are skills that bridge both work and play, and that budgeting of time that you mentioned, thinking of, well, how do I shape my week? How do I look at my week and even recognize the places within it that fit naturally, or that I could reshape based on a purpose of like, well, when can I fit in doing a workout, and or the kinds of workouts I want to do. Like, I want to meditate or do yoga or go for a run or whatever. Like these, how do I set up circumstance in my recurring experience? It doesn't have to be every day. A trap I've encountered is sometimes I try to like fit it all in every day. And I'm like, all right, now instead of 20 minutes, it's 5 minutes. And I didn't find that too helpful. But if I'm willing to, so like your capacity expands over, on a recurring basis over it doesn't have to just be one day, but, and then that's pretty helpful for pretty much anything. And, I got one other too, is that, caring to use those skills to make sure you have the capacity for both, the rejuvenating play and whatnot, and also that playfulness, engaging in work with playfulness and not forgetting that word. I think lots of folks would hear that and be like, yeah, of course. But I know sometimes I'll get a little too serious about the kind of, about the client work, the day job stuff and what have you. And finding playfulness in that, that it's great to, I need that. And I'm better when I am a little more loose on my feet.
Agreed. I know I am exactly, well, I was going to say I was exactly the same. I'm not, I can't say that. I don't know. But what you said resonates with me in that I know I become extremely anxious when I'm on deadline. Why else would I have, like, this is the funny thing. Like, people say like, oh, you're so organized because you have an ETP. No, I have the ETP because I am fretting all the time where I am on my project. And that thing helps keep me anchored. I need it. It's not that I'm so good because I have it. It's because I don't feel like I have much control unless I have this thing to anchor me, right? And part of the reason I feel I don't have that control is because I have so much anxiety surrounding being midstream on a thing. I want to know that it's going to happen and it's going to be shipped on the date that I said it would, and so on. And if it's not, then do I have steps to ameliorate the situation and make this thing actually happen, right?
Worth planting a flag quick. ETP, Emergent Task Planner, davidsay.com.
Thank you. Yes, the Emergent Task Planner, which we talk about a lot on the show. But if you're new to the show, welcome. We talk a lot about this task planner that you can find at davidsay.com, SEAH. But yes, so that can rob the joy from the thing, right?
Darn anxiety.
Yeah. Anxiety is a great motivator. It can also become way too powerful. Joy and playfulness can be a wonderful flavoring of an event. It can also distract you and send you off course, and suddenly you're not working on this stuff anymore.
Super good point. That
through the middle.
Yeah, somehow, even if I don't have that motorcycle yet, I need to keep working on the other projects, continuing the prototype for the game I'm working on, continuing the draft for the comic I'm working on. It's I somehow have landed on feeling better about the day or the week when it's like, yeah, both things happened. I'm moving ahead. It's not done yet, but
Yeah.
What do you think?
All right. I think we did a podcast.
I think
All
so
right,
too.
So, all right, we do this show every week. Usually on Thursday nights. This time it was on a Wednesday, but Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. It's broadcast live on YouTube so that you can hang out and interact with us in the chat room. Thanks to the folks who have been doing so. And then it's archived at patreon.com/leanintoart. And there'll be more social media stuff mentioned in a few seconds. But thank you, Rob, for this discussion. Thank you to Olivia for the great curveball. Please do feel free to give us future curveballs on our Patreon page. That is super fun to engage with what you guys are worried about, what you're anxious about, and what you care about. But until next time, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Instagram.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us.
Thank you.